Cool. You're on.
Thank you.
You're on. You're on now. Yep. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Councillor Alex Yip. I'm the councillor for Sutton Coldfield Wylde Green. And this is the first time we're trying a virtual ward meeting. I'm delighted to be joined by the town councillors, Councillor Sam Hodgkins and Leaford Allen, as well as we are co-hosted with the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum. That's Councillor Terry Wood, who's also joining with us. We do have some officer support, including Carl Randall, John Mole and Leslie Bannister is helping us with the technology. I do hope you will all bear with us. This is the first time that we are trying this, so there may be some technical issues. Regarding the way that we're going to do this, so firstly I need to let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded for posterity, and there will be a link that's being made available for everybody to watch afterwards, and hopefully there'll be some extra facilities tagged along with that as well. In terms of people contributing, if you have a look on your screen in the middle, there should be next to the various buttons across the middle of your screen, alongside the live button, the camera and the mute, there should be a button which, if you hover over, it says show Q&A, and it looks like two speech bubbles, sorry, with a question mark in the middle. If you are able to click onto this button, then there is a facility where we strongly would like you all to write your comments in as we go along, and this would be the way that we can get your interaction, your comments along with the various briefings that we got. So please do comment as we go along, write anything that you like, any questions as you go along, and we as moderators, we will look at the questions as we go along, and then I'll pose them to the speaker that we have. Looking at the agenda that we have today, we do have a number of speakers, starting with Dr. Justin Varney, who's giving us a briefing on COVID. And then we'll hope to get someone from the West Midlands Police, but we're struggling to get them on at the moment with technical issues. Then we have someone from the Commonwealth Games who's giving us a briefing on that. And then I myself will give a ward briefing updates and take any questions from yourselves. So without any more further ado, I would like to hand over to Dr. Justin Varney, who will give you a quick summary on where we stand. And again, if anybody who is able to, do click on the show Q&A button, do write your comments and we will pose them as questions as we go along. And this will take us up to 7:30. I think I've covered everything. Justin, good evening. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Councillor Yep. Sorry, I was a little late joining you this evening. So what I thought I'd do is give you a short overview of where we've been on the journey with COVID so far in the city, where we're going next. I'll talk a little bit about risk factors and a little bit about the test and trace service as well. But happy to take any questions as they come up through the chat box as we go. So COVID first appeared back in December in the world, and it seems a long time ago since then, and we've been through quite a journey. We saw the first case appear in the UK in February, and then the first case appeared in Birmingham about the second week of March, and we saw a pretty fast increase in cases then up until around the middle of April. Then at our top day we had 134 new cases in a single day. Then we dropped down, went back up again, and then since kind of mid-May, we've been a gradual decline in terms of number of cases. Now, over the last couple of weeks, case numbers in Birmingham have started to rise again. That's probably a reflection that we're all out, we're socialising a little bit more. We're seeing people we haven't seen for a long time, so we want to give love and shake hands, give them a hug, and unfortunately, we're passing along COVID when we're doing that. And we are seeing that reflected. So at the moment, we're running at about 14 cases per 100,000 population, whereas 3 weeks ago, we were only 5 per 100,000 population. In terms of spread across the city, it's pretty general. It fluctuates day on day, and each week government publish at a what's called a medium super output area. So you can put your postcode into the search engine and find out the number of cases over the last week. But what I would say is those numbers are jumping up and down pretty much on a daily basis. And when I look at the pattern across Birmingham, it's pretty even spread. And some days we see a rise in Hodge Hill, other days we see a rise in Perry Bar, then it's Edgbaston or Moseley, and it's very much going up and down. And when you look at those maps, what you're seeing is the dark colours, so the darker shades on the maps, are a maximum of 20 cases in a week in any one area. And if we think the population in that area is about 4,000 to 5,000 people, 20 cases is not that dramatic. Across the city, we're seeing testing rates are pretty even as well, which is good. And it's really important to encourage people to test if they have symptoms. And you get a test by either ringing 119 or going on the NHS website. 119 has translators now, so if you tell them that you speak a different language, they will get a translator for you on the phone and talk to you through the translator, which is great. There are 3 ways you get the test. Firstly, you can go to one of the drive-through sites. For us, those are moving around the city. There's one in Moseley, in the Rugby Football Club, one at the Brewery Street Coach Park, and one at City Football Ground at the St Andrews Stadium. The one at Edgbaston is about to move as well, so there's a bit of change going on. If you live within walking distance of Newtown, which I doubt many of you do, I think my geography of Birmingham is still learning, but I don't think it's quite on your doorstep. Then you can go to the walk-through testing site in Villa Street, but you have to have an appointment booked as you do for the drive-through. Or you can get a postal kit, and that's a kit sent to your home, which you do, and then it tells you which post box you have to post that kit into to return it. So they're the 3 ways of getting testing. If you test positive, you'll get a call from the NHS Test and Trace service or a text message. That's anonymous, and they will have a conversation with you about where you've been in the couple of days before you develop symptoms or since you've had symptoms. And that's to identify anyone else who might be at risk so that they can be in contact with them and give them the right advice on what they should do to stay safe. And that will usually mean them staying in self-isolation for 14 days. That means staying at home, not going out, getting your shopping brought to you for 14 days. We don't routinely test people who are contacts of cases, and that's because although you can be exposed today, because the swab is done from your nose or from your throat, it can take 2 or 3 or more days for you to have enough virus back there for the swab to pick it up. So, and we know that some people get exposed on day 1 and don't actually start to show any signs or be able to find that virus until day 10 or 12. And that's what the 14 days is about. That's why it's 14 days. Very unusual for someone to develop symptoms after about 12 days. So that's why they went with 14 days. So I'll move on to talk about the next wave and where we're heading. So we know from the research that about 20% of the population have caught COVID so far. So that's 80% of us that haven't had it yet. And it's important to recognise, therefore, that we will have a second wave. I don't think it's an if, it's a when. And there are 2 schools of thought on this. One is that we will see this second wave coming in the summer as we all start to come out and socialise a bit more. But if we do that outdoors and we have a nice day, which we didn't have in Birmingham today, unfortunately, but if we have nice weather, the windows are open, people are socialising outdoors, that's a much lower risk than if everyone's indoors. And although the virus, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference for the weather, there is some evidence that the colder and wetter it is, the more the virus survives, and it survives a bit longer. So we are seeing other parts of the world that have moved into their winter season. That's where they're being hit harder, like Australia at the moment, for example. So the expectation is we'll probably see second wave around November time, and it will look very similar to the first wave. There's no reason why it wouldn't. It's very unlikely we'll have a vaccine by then. Most vaccines take about 18 months to develop, and there's a huge global effort to get one faster. but it still has to go through all the same safety checks and trials and tests. So even if we have a vaccine that works in the autumn, it will then take about 6 months to manufacture enough vaccine to then roll out, and then we've got to give everyone their injection. And if you think about the seasonal flu jab every year, that's only given to people over 65 or those with healthcare conditions or children under 5, that takes us about 5 months to do, and that's not even half the population. So if we've got to vaccinate everyone, it's going to take us quite a long time. So we are going to be in this world where social distancing remains really important for quite a long time, and while COVID is a real risk. So I'll finish by talking a bit about how you reduce your risk of being very unwell if you catch COVID. So we know there are 6 key risk factors for being very unwell or unfortunately increased risk of dying from COVID. 3 of them you can't do anything about, 3 of them you can. So the 3 that you can't do anything about is your age, no matter what the beauty products tell you, your gender and your ethnicity. So if you are over 80, you have a 1 in 5 chance of dying of COVID if you're admitted to hospital. And so it's really important we protect our older people and look after them and keep them safe from COVID, because it is serious, very serious illness for older people. Men are more likely to be extremely unwell and more likely to die if they catch COVID. And people from non-white British ethnicities are also more likely to be seriously unwell and to die if they go into hospital with COVID. And those 3 are generally, apart from age, are a reflection of the 3 that you can do something about. So we know, first of all, that your risk of dying if you are carrying a lot of extra weight, so if you're very overweight or obese, particularly if you've got a body mass index of over 40, your chance of dying if you catch COVID is much, much higher. So that's a really important one that we can do something about, and we can help people to get on top of their weight, because most of us have put on a little bit of extra weight during lockdown. It's a good time to try and undo that. The second is smoking. There's an increased risk of dying, being seriously unwell if you're a smoker. And again, even if you just switch from smoking cigarettes to e-cigarettes, that significantly reduces your risk of being seriously unwell. So again, really good time. You've got 3 or 4 months before the next wave. It's a good time to give up before the next wave. And then the third area is around long-term conditions. So diseases like diabetes, coronary heart disease, high blood pressure, kidney disease, and chronic airways disease. And there are 2 elements to this. First is simply having the disease increases your chance of being more unwell if you catch COVID. But secondly, if your condition is not very well managed, so for example, if you're a diabetic and your blood sugars are always going all over the place, you are much more likely to be very unwell and more likely to die if you catch COVID. So it's not just having the disease, it's also how well it's controlled. And that's some of what we see explaining both by men are increased risk of dying from COVID and also people from non-white British ethnic groups. Now, in some ethnic communities, the incidence, so the occurrence of the disease is higher, and some of that's about diet, some of it's about genetics. So we see more type 2 diabetes, for example, in South Asian populations. But it's also that we know from some of the work before COVID that individuals that are not white British are less likely to have the NHS do all the things that it should to support them. So for diabetes, there are about 9 checks that every diabetic should have every year. And in the national audit, what it found was if you were white British, you had about an 80% chance of having all 9. And if you were for any other ethnicity, that dropped down to about 70%. And for some ethnicities, it dropped even lower. And some of that's about how we all engage with the health service, and some of it's about how the health service engage with us. So now's the time to get on top of your health. If you've got an existing health condition, then check in with your practice. Is there anything else you should be doing to get on top of this before the second wave? We will be launching a new campaign probably next week now called Be Healthy, which is a really simple checklist of things that you can do. So it is literally go through the list and tick off all the things that you can do to make sure that you are healthier for the next wave. We know from the research at the moment that about a third of people who've caught COVID, who've definitely had it, don't develop antibodies. Of those that do develop antibodies, at least a third, those antibodies disappear after a month or two and the body forgets how to make them. So we're pretty certain that for a lot of people, you can catch this twice. So it's really important as something that all of us can do. The final thing I'll touch on is I just want to reflect some of the work that I've been doing with Councillor Yip throughout this outbreak and to actually engage with communities, and particularly the Chinese community, where he's really helped us and worked with us, as have other members across the council who've got specific connections with communities. And that's been on two fronts. One is recognising that there've been a lot of community tensions, not just as we were coming into COVID, but through this. But also helping us to engage with communities where English isn't necessarily their first language, and making sure that everyone in the city has the information they need to protect themselves, their families and their communities, because ultimately COVID spreads through the actions we all take, and all of us have a responsibility to keep the city safe, and all of us have a responsibility to take some action now to prepare before the next wave comes. So I'll leave it there, Councillor Yip, and I'm happy to take any questions that have come up.
Justin, thank you very much indeed. I think it's very much on that vein where you said that everybody needs to have the information that they need, which we're very much appreciative for the briefings that you've done across the city already, and of course coming to Sutton, Wylde Green and speaking to residents here as well. We can see on the live Q&A, for residents who have just joined us, we are trying to make this as interactive as possible, and we appreciate that it is somewhat limited, that we can't speak to you face to face. This is the first ward meeting that we've had since I think it's October now, so we're very keen to reach out to as many residents as we can. If you are able to wave your mouse in the middle of the screen, there is a icon in the middle which looks like two speech bubbles, one with a question mark on it, and that says show Q&A. And we invite you all to write your comments and questions as we go along. We as moderators will be able to view them all and then pose the questions to Justin and our next speakers. So we've got a question from Emma, as you can see in the live Q&A, regarding schools and foreseeing schools closing second wave if a second wave occurs in November.
Yeah, and it's one of the things, firstly to say we've worked really closely with schools throughout this. So across Birmingham, about 80% of schools have remained open for key workers and for vulnerable children throughout the outbreak. We've had a very small number of cases in schools, and this is kind of a reflection of how well the schools have responded. Is in every time we've had that, it's only been 1 or 2 cases and it hasn't spread, and they've picked up the phone pretty much immediately, got in touch and done the right thing. We're seeing the same thing actually in workplaces, and I think that's one of the key messages to get across, just before I focus on the question, about actually, if you are an employer and you have a case in your workplace, let us know. We can help you, and in most cases, workplaces don't have to shut for more than a couple of hours to do some cleaning, and actually it's much easier to manage. If you sit on it, and you end up with 4 or 5 cases before we find out, by then probably you will need to close because so many people will be affected. So if you do have a case, let us know early. In terms of what we see for schools over the autumn, we're working with the schools on planning their risk assessments for September and how they can make sure that children as they return to schools will be safe. I think probably actually they're safer in schools than they are in many other settings, because the schools are really thinking about keeping kids safe, keeping teachers safe, and making sure they're not taking anything home as well. So they're really good at hand washing. But also part of that planning is what would happen if we got a second wave. So the school thinking through, likelihood is they'll get 2 to 3 days notice if we were moving in the direction that Leicester has, for example. So we're talking through with them now, well in advance. You need to have your plans. How quickly can you flip back to virtual teaching if you need to? What are the children that you'd be very concerned about? And the other thing that's going on, which I know is a completely cross-party effort across the council at the moment, is focusing on digital exclusion. And there's a big charity effort at the moment through the Birmingham Education Partnership. Anyone who's got spare computers, old iPads, laptops sitting at home, please go on the council website. We really need them donated because we'll wipe them and we'll give them to kids in houses that don't have computers, because unfortunately there are many children who weren't able to get that learning, and we need to make sure in the second wave, before this happens, that we have all the kit ready so that if we do have to flip to digital again, we don't have a cohort of children who miss out on that opportunity. So it is being thought about, and we're making sure we're ready, as we are across all the council services as well. How quickly can we move back if we need to keep our staff safe and to keep citizens safe?
Thank you very much, Justin. Can I get an answer? One of the questions that was emailed to me earlier was regarding how quickly can we get testing done, how quickly the results come back.
Sure. So in terms of testing, if you order a test, so if you order a test through 119 and it's a postal test, it normally gets to you the next day. Obviously, if you order at 11 o'clock at night, it will take another day, but normally if you order during the day, you'll get it the next day. If you take the test and you post it back that afternoon, you'll get the result within 48 hours of posting it back. If you go to the drive-through site, you normally get the result within 24 hours. So the drive-through sites are faster in terms of getting a result. However, I should say, if you've got symptoms and you get a test and the test is negative, you still have to stay at home until you've done 7 days since your symptoms started. The difference of a negative test is it means the people that you live with don't have to stay at home. So that's why testing is really important, particularly if you live with someone that needs to go out for work. You getting a test, and if that test is negative, they can continue to go out to work. But if it's positive, obviously they need to stay home as well. It is getting faster. The walk-through site as well is about 24 hours like the drive-through sites.
That's very handy, thank you. You can see some of the questions are coming in terms of concerns around especially using public transport and the guidance around using masks. Could you perhaps elaborate a little bit on that as well, please?
Yeah, so the important bit about face coverings is face coverings protect the world from us. So this is why we talk about face coverings being something that we all do to protect society, particularly those people that can't wear face coverings, and people with some forms of disability and small children can't wear face coverings. So what a face covering does is it keeps the virus close to your face and stops you spreading it. Now, that's particularly important for people that have very mild symptoms and may not be aware that they're infectious. And where other countries have done this, we've seen that does make a difference. It's important if you use a face covering, you don't fidget with it, because the more you touch it, the more you're actually putting any of the germs that from other people that are on your hands onto your face, and that puts a risk to you. It's also important if you're using a disposable face covering, you don't just leave it in the gutter, because then a binman's got to come along and pick up that wad of fabric that's just covered with your germs. So please think about this responsibly. You know, if you're out and about, I keep a little sandwich bag in my pocket. If it's not on my face, it's in my sandwich bag. And that way I can take it on and off if I need to have something to eat or to drink. But it is about reducing the risk from you to the world. You can make it in really ideally 3 layers of fabric. You can make it from a tea towel, t-shirt. What I would say is don't try and knit them because knitting's got too many holes in it. But pretty much anything else you can make a face mask out of, a face covering. And it's really important we wear them if you're going into an enclosed space with strangers. And this is, I think, one point just to make is the reason we're saying wear them in shops and wearing them on public transport is, unlike schools, unlike workplaces, we don't know who else is in that space. So if someone does test positive and they've been to Tesco's, it's very difficult to know who else has been there. If they're wearing a face covering and they went to Tesco's, the risk to everyone else shopping in Tesco's is very, very small. So that's why we're encouraging people to wear those face coverings, particularly going into buildings and into public transport where they could be with strangers and where it would be very difficult to try and understand how the virus is spread without them.
Thank you, Justin. A quick question regarding the most local testing sites, drive-through testing sites. Is that Edgbaston? And I know there's some that move around, is that right?
Yeah, so Edgbaston at the moment, it is moving though. When you book
That's
a
the
test
Edgbaston
through,
cricket ground, is it?
yeah, when you book a test on 119 or through the NHS website, it'll ask for your postcode and then it will tell you what the nearest site to you is. And it knows the ones that are moving around, it knows what's moving when. So for example, the Brewery Street car park, which I think is probably the closest one to Wylde Green by road, after Edgbaston closes, will be your closest one, but it's only there 3 days a week and it's not there every week. So the website knows and 119 knows, and when you give them a website, your postcode, they will tell you what's closest to you tomorrow. So
That's
you'll get a
very handy.
test tomorrow. Sometimes you get a test the same day, but usually it's the next day.
Thank you very much, Justin. We've got a question from Nick regarding what clear factors would trigger local restrictions, whether there's anything that we would be considering Leicester-like.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of looking at that at the moment, is that Leicester in comparison, so we're running 14 cases per 100,000. Leicester's currently about 101 cases per 100,000. And when they were locked down, they were running at about 140 cases per 100,000. So we're watching this quite closely and we're looking at a couple of things. So first of all is the number of cases that come through each day. That's staying pretty steady for Birmingham, between 20 and 25 cases each day. How much of that is linked to things that we know and we understand? So in Birmingham, where we've seen an increase, what we've seen is a lot of households becoming infected, where we can see 4 or 5 people in the same house. And if I've got 2 or 3 houses like that in a particular geographical area, that doesn't worry me particularly. If I had 10 houses with 1 person in rather than 2 houses with 10 people, that's more worrying. That makes sense. So we're looking at the pattern of spread as well as the increase in case numbers. What we're also looking at is hospital admissions, which for us in Birmingham is very low. And we're also looking at the proportion of tests that are positive. So it's a combination of where the numbers are going and do we understand what's happening. And in Leicester, what they saw was a rapid increase in the numbers without any real reason that they could explain. So it's not quite as straightforward as saying, here's the magic number. Here's the potential number plus a whole series of other things. And 3 times a week, as Director of Public Health, I give an opinion to the leader and to the Chief Executive of where we are. I obviously look at it every day as well, so I can ring the alarm bells if I need to. But formally, I give an opinion 3 times a week to the leader and Chief Exec, saying this is where I think we are against my estimate of where how likely is what will become a Leicester or a Blackburn at the moment.
Thank you, Justin. Trying to pull a couple of the other comments that we've got coming through. In your opening remarks, you mentioned in terms of 20% of the population have currently caught the virus, and it's your opinion that it's very much when a second wave will come, not if. Some of the comments on the chat have sort of commented, coming back on that, you're saying it looks very similar to the first wave. And I suppose your view would be that social distancing will remain for some time. Can you give us an update on how likely vaccination and timelines that will come in, and in terms of answering the comments around the second wave, please? Sure.
So we think at the moment, currently working on the basis we'll probably have a vaccine rolled out by about this time next year. And that's assuming that the trials, which are looking good at the moment, continue to look good. They're moving some of the testing around the world, and that's following where the outbreak is, because in the later stages of testing of a vaccine, you need to give it to people in a country where there's lots of the illness, and that's the kind of towards the end stages. And they're just starting that in South America, for example. They've also got to test it on enough people to know that it works in older people, different ethnic groups, different genders as well. So it does take a while. We don't think at the moment this virus is showing any signs of dying out of its own accord. Now, some of the other coronaviruses like SARS and MERS did die out to some extent faster of their own accord. I think one of the differences with SARS and MERS is they tended to kill people faster. So and they didn't see people that didn't have symptoms or very mild symptoms spreading it. So you tended to catch SARS and be very, very sick very quickly. And that's not great for an organism that wants to spread it, because the person who's spreading it is too sick to walk around. Whereas with COVID-19, we're seeing that many people get it. They're unwell, but they're not so unwell that they stop doing things. And that's one of the problems, actually, and why getting an early test is so important.
Thank you. A couple more questions. Factual one, do you know what the R rate is for Sutton Coldfield versus other areas in the West Midlands?
No, we don't do the R rate at lower levels, partially because the smaller the numbers, the bigger the margin of error and the more meaningless it becomes. What I would say in terms of the pattern of cases across the city is that Sutton Coldfield pops up just as much as South Birmingham or Central Birmingham. We're seeing a pretty even pattern actually across the city. So it's not exempt, and I'm not seeing a lower rate in Sutton Coldfield than the rest of the city. It's pretty much the same picture.
Thank you. You also mentioned in your opening remarks around concerns of people having to catch it twice because of their immunity going. Any views on the virus potentially mutating?
Yeah, we're watching this quite carefully. I mean, certainly, and the way I kind of describe it, if you think of coronavirus like a coat, and COVID-19 like a coat, and as it's going around the world, it's changing the odd button, but it's not changing its fabric, it's not changing the style of coat. And we certainly know as the virus moved through Iran and Italy, there were two kind of variants that emerged. And I think last time I was reading an article about this, there were about 5 variants about the world. Doesn't look like these variants do anything particularly different. It's again one of the reasons in the vaccine trial they're making sure that it protects against different variants. But what we've not seen yet is kind of COVID-20 or COVID-21 appearing. They're very much kind of COVID-19 with a very little letter next to it, suggesting there's not a huge amount of difference. And we're certainly not seeing any different patterns in terms of how spreadable or how dangerous the virus is.
Thank you. And I know that you need to go at about past, so we're keeping you a little bit longer than normal.
All right.
Any final words on how to reduce the risk? So you mentioned that, of course, everybody should know now about washing hands regularly, using soap and water for at least 20 seconds, etc., maintaining social distancing, using masks and disposing of them responsibly. Any other words on how to further mitigate that? I know that as eased and people return to restaurants, bars, using public transport, then of course the risk will grow with that as well. And any other sensible advice for people to take who are perhaps slightly more elderly, slightly more at risk, and people who have been isolating and shielding, and then of course now the advice has changed for them, that is no longer necessary?
Sure. So I'll pick that up and I'll cover off a couple of the other questions just that came up through as well in my closing kind of comments on this. So unfortunately, this is really basic stuff. The way we stop this virus spreading is by washing our hands frequently, avoiding touching our face, keeping that 2 meters of distance from each other, and wearing a face covering if we're going into enclosed spaces with strangers. Those are the things that stop spreading this virus at the moment, and things that we can all do. There is very little point in getting a test if you haven't got symptoms, unless you're asked to by public health or by the NHS. And there's no point in everyone testing frequently, not least because we don't have the laboratory capacity. If you're traveling somewhere that requires you to get a test, there are ways to do this privately. If you Google, there are lots of the private clinics, and it's the same as having to have a travel vaccine where you need to pay for it, unfortunately. One area where I would ask people to be really alert is visiting each other. As I said at the beginning, one of the concerns I have is we're all giving a little bit of love and we're giving a little bit extra by passing on COVID. So being really conscious, if you are visiting friends or family, you're able to come together as 2 households visiting each other, but no more than that. So you shouldn't be having kind of 6 different groups of friends in the same house at the same time. If you're visiting elderly relatives or households where there are elderly relatives, I'd ask you to really break up your visits. Go 2 or 3 at a time, not everyone all at once. It's a lot easier to be safe. Try to avoid sitting face to face. If you can sit side by side, it's a lot safer. If you're sitting around the dining table having lunch, sitting so that you sit opposite someone that you live with rather than sitting opposite someone that you don't live with will help reduce the risk as well. So those are just some of the extra things that you start to think about. This virus works by spreading through the spray we put out of our mouths. It's not a very nice image, but think of it a bit like projectile vomit. Any of you who've had little babies know that they're very good at just aiming in a vertical direction out of their mouths. That's what the virus does. So if you're directly facing someone, that's a much higher risk to them than if you're standing side by side talking. So those are just some of the extra things you can do, is being really conscious about how you're talking to someone and how you're facing them will reduce their risk. But at the heart of this, it's wash your hands, keep your distance, and if you're going indoors somewhere that you don't live, put a face covering on.
Thank you, Justin. There's an email that's just come in regarding travel as well, travelling to other countries, restrictions, etc., and a potential risk being on airplanes. Could you give some comments on that as well, please?
Yeah, so airplanes are relatively low risk. So what we're not seeing is particular outbreaks associated with airplanes. This is interesting because we thought, you would think, well, all that recycled air and everything else. Actually, airplanes have got some of the best filters in the world. So the air they specifically do that because otherwise you get outbreaks on airplanes. Most airplanes will require you to wear a face covering on the plane. They're not ramming everyone in, so you've got a bit more space. You should be spaced out apart on the plane as well. So I don't think the plane itself is particularly high risk. The space that I would say you need to stay alert in is the airport at either end. And that's not so much about the interaction around people, because that's not particularly different from the supermarket. It's the common touch points. So door handles, banisters, the rail on the escalator, those things that might not be cleaned as frequently, and you touch them and then you're tired because you've just got off a plane and you touch your face. And the way the virus gets into your body is off your fingers, touching your face. It's not a mountain tracker. So if you touch the back of your head, that's low risk. But if you touch the front of your face, it can crawl across your face, up your nose, in your eyes or into your mouth. And that's how it gets into your body. So I think airplanes in general, low risk, but make sure you've got your face covering. If you've got some hand sanitizer with you, I'd be hand sanitizing quite a lot. And keep in mind, like schools, airlines are doing their best to keep you safe because it's in their interest. If we get a massive outbreak attached to an airplane, everyone will stop traveling. So they're doing everything they can to keep you safe. The important thing is listen to what they're asking you to do, and please pay attention and do it.
That's great. Justin, thank you very much indeed. We've kept you a little bit longer than normal. I know at the residents here, you're talking about sharing the love. There's a lot of people on the comments who are very appreciative of your informative presentation. So thank you very much for your time. Yes, that's great. Thanks so much indeed, Justin.
Pleasure. Okay. Take care.
So just to remind residents in terms of contributing to the this virtual ward meeting, I hope that you will accept our apologies for any technical issues and of course not being able to present to you face to face. This is the first ward meeting that we've had since October, so it's been a number of months now. And of course, we're very keen to get some information around COVID out to residents as much as we can. In order to contribute, there is a button in the middle of your screen, which looks like 2 speech bubbles with a question mark in the middle. And that says Q&A. So if you are able to click on it and type in any questions and comments as we go through, we will then take questions as we go along. And any comments that are posted are vetted, and then of course we will post and share them to the wider group chat. So you can see the questions that have already been posed that we are doing our best to answer as we go along. Now, talking about technical issues, we were hoping to have someone from the West Midlands Police come in and give us a briefing. I understand that she is actually joining us, unfortunately, through the comments function, as opposed to being able to present virtually to yourselves. If that is the case, Rachel, I hope that you will let yourself be known. What we will try and do is take comments as we normally would after our presentation. So again, if anybody has any questions that they would like posed to the officer, we can have a message posted, and of course we will get her to reply to that through a message. In terms of a briefing on her behalf, if I may be so bold, we were just actually on Penn's Lane with the PCSO Rachel French doing a speed watch along Penn's Lane. I know that speed has been a massive concern for many residents on many areas across the whole ward. We were joined by the two town councillors, Councillor Sam and Leaford, and also Councillor David Barry from Walmley, as well as a number of residents, and we did catch quite a few drivers who were speeding, and as you would expect, down Penn's Lane, coming down from Walmley, heading towards the Birmingham Road. One still doing 50 as they were approaching quite a large group of people, all wearing high-vis jackets. So they will, of course, be receiving some communication from the police. And I know that PCSO Rachel French is keen on doing more of these across the ward and across Sutton Coldfield, and I know many residents have contacted me around particular areas of concern. Regarding other issues that have been raised to me, many residents have told me about the graffiti that's appeared along Birmingham Road and across the shops down by the lanes. Unfortunately, I'm very grateful to the residents who took it upon themselves to clear it up using their own equipment and turps, etc. This was of course reported up to Birmingham City Council and removed pretty sharpish. I'm grateful to the resident who's told me about the one that still remains on the bridge, which we have actioned. Residents may also know about some issues which unfortunately have returned along Kempston Avenue. Now, despite many efforts by ourselves, town councillors, to set up a neighbourhood watch and high visibility profiling action that we've taken on that, supported by residents, unfortunately there have been some instances. The advice still remains, of course, just to be as careful as you can with your keys, etc., keep them out of sight. But we are asking the police to do extra patrols along that, and I'm pretty sure the officer will remind us, as I've been receiving in my own briefings, around the burglary rate, which remains very low across Wylde Green and across Sutton Coldfield, although that may not be what many people feel. There has been a survey which I've distributed around, and again comments have been returned around the drug use around the lanes, especially litter around the lanes, and many residents will know about the work that we've taken to hold the landlords to account on that, which has taken many months, but I'm glad to see that that has paid dividends now. The drug use, especially the little noxious oxide canisters that have appeared around the whole of Sutton Coldfield, unfortunately, we are, of course, well aware of this, and we are doing what we can to combat this. Unfortunately, is low-level antisocial behaviour, and with police resources reasonably stretched, there is, of course, only so much we can do around trying to bring people to task on that. There's other issues that have been raised, including especially around the graffiti that I've already mentioned, and also things like speeding as well, which, as we mentioned, down on Penn's Lane, but it's also been flagged up along Station Road, Green Lanes, and of course Birmingham Road as well, which we are well aware of. I'm looking at the comments now in terms of speed. Grateful for one from Helen regarding Birmingham Road. Again, this is something which we do know, and this is something that we are trying to do what we can. We can see that Rachel has joined. Excellent, and I'll just publish that message. Grateful for the next speed watch which is set up on Kempston Avenue, which is booked in, and this will be, I think it's the third one that we've done now over the past couple of months. Got a message from a resident regarding the waste bins. So this is something which has been flagged up quite regularly to me around the waste bins at the lanes, just to confirm that the actual ones in front of Spa and Costa, they're actually owned by the landlord. So those are actually have to be maintained by them, and they're the ones that have to be emptied by them. And what we saw during COVID is that it seems that the very good cleaner who was employed by them was either made redundant or furloughed for a number of months, and that was why there was a huge pile-up of waste during those few months, and those bins just simply weren't emptied. And of course, it's not council's responsibility, and it's nothing that I can action to get emptied. We did hold a number of litter picks, and we emptied them on the landlord's behalf, just to try and keep things tidy. But it's something which I know many residents are very frustrated with. They do have council branding on them, but just to reiterate that they are owned by the landlord. If there are any other comments in terms of with the policing updates, I will hover here for a little moment to see if anybody else has any of the comments. Otherwise, I fear that you may all get sick of the sound of my voice. And of course, I'm just talking into a black hole at the moment, so I'm not too sure how well this is being received. What I will do, there is a comment regarding Pepe's Peri Peri chicken, which I will bring up in my ward update at the end of this meeting, if I may. The next item on the agenda is one from Claire Bowden, who is the Engagement and Promotions Officer with the Commonwealth Games. Claire, if you're ready, if I may bring you in at this point, that'll be very handy.
Yes, of course. 1 second.
Fantastic. Thank you, Claire. So we're very grateful to be joined by Claire, who's been doing an awful lot of work promoting the Commonwealth Games as an opportunity for the city. And we've been having a number of briefings, and I thought this would be a nice opportunity to bring you in and update residents on how this will be, how it will benefit ideally just Sutton Coldfield and Wylde Green, and what residents will expect and any disruptions to be expected as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Yip. Hello, everyone. My name's Claire. Thank you for letting me join the meeting tonight in obviously slightly, strange virtual circumstances. Obviously, Councillor Yip asked me to come along this evening as he has been involved in the Commonwealth Games Council and Member Advisory Board for the last 4 years. So Councillor Yip is very, hands-on in the delivery of the games, and and how it affects the ward of Wylde Green, and obviously a bit more wider than Sutton Coldfield. So thank you for letting me join. I mean, I'm not going to talk at length to you, but I think it's just a real quite pertinent time at the minute to be talking about the Commonwealth Games, really, because tomorrow marks 2 years to go until the Games actually begins in Birmingham. And I think that it's fair to say that the Games has, since it was awarded to Birmingham back at the end of 2017, it's been, there's been lots of, negative talk and things like that, and that's quite unfair in one sense. And the Games are happening, and it's a reason to to celebrate, really, that this massive global event is coming to our city, and in particular to your town, with the triathlon being held in nearby Sutton Park, just a couple of miles up the road. This event is a once in a lifetime opportunity for Birmingham and for the residents, really. These types of events don't come around very often, and to happen in our city is fantastic. It's the first time an event has been held of this size in England in the last 10 years. So, like I say, I have done a little bit of a PowerPoint, but I'm not sure if people want to see that or they'd rather see my face. I'm not too sure, really. But the reason why I'm here to talk about is just to generate some type of excitement, really, around the Games, and just to give you some basic kind of facts about the Games. So I'll just try and see if I can share my screen with you all. I won't bore you too much. Just bear with me. Can everybody see that?
Yes, looks good so far.
Fantastic. So just to give you a little bit of background. So in approximately 731 days, Birmingham will host the 22nd Commonwealth Games. The Games will be held from the 28th of July until the 8th of August. So there has been a slight change in the date. The date has been put back by 1 day, just because of COVID, and that obviously with the movement of the Tokyo Olympics, that has had quite a knock-on effect in the sporting calendar. So there's been a little bit of a lot of logistical challenges, not from Birmingham City Council, but just in general in the sporting calendar. So the Games will run for an 11-day period in 2 years' time. And it's important to kind of remember that we, as a council, we are a Games partner. So we're not in charge of the overall delivery. That is by the Birmingham 2022 Organising Committee. So we work in partnership with them to deliver the games, and kind of from a council perspective, we are really kind of looking at community engagement and you know, the city operations. So effectively we have been we've been looking, we've been obviously redeveloping the Alexander Stadium. There's been work in Perry Bar, the regeneration scheme there. So there's lots and lots of things going on with the games, and it's going to be a fantastic celebration of sport and of culture. And more importantly, for everyone in Birmingham, the event will create a legacy for Birmingham and for, you know, the citizens like yourselves, really. So, you know, it isn't just a physical games, it has knock-on effects for everybody in, you know, in a positive way, really. So just to give you a little bit of background, so there's going to be 19 sports that will be participated in during the games. I've just included a list of several of them here, and the one that will really will be kind of interest to you all is the triathlon, which will be held in Sutton Park. And that is for able-bodied and disabled people, so there'll be a para version of the triathlon as well, which is fantastic, and it really hammers home that the games is a games for everybody. There hasn't been any dates set, like a timetable yet, so I can't confirm to you, and it's not a council decision of when, you know, the triathlon, for example, you know, will be held, but as soon as there is a timetable, and then things will obviously accordingly be communicated if there's any disruptions, and obviously how to attend the event and so forth, really. So yeah, so the triathlon is probably the most maybe of more relevance to you all, but obviously there's aquatics, there's athletics, there's boxing, there's cycling, and they're taking place in a variety of venues across Birmingham and the wider West Midlands as well. And obviously we do get asked a lot of questions about ticketing and volunteering and how can I get involved, and that's what we kind of want to do, really. We want to inspire people, educate people and inform people. So the ticketing side and the volunteering side is not something that the council is you know, accountable for. That is from the organising committee, but I'm here to relay that information to you. So if you are interested in coming along, there'll be over 1 million tickets that will be available for people to attend. Tickets are not available yet, and they're likely, I can't 100% confirm anything like that, but they're likely to be made available towards the end of the year or at the start of 2021. So to if you are interested, what you'd need to do is register at the Birmingham 2022 website. And then you fill out all your details on there, and then you'll be notified then as well as to you know, when the tickets go on sale, and you know, what type of event or sport that you're interested in attending. And just moving forward again, volunteering, we always get asked a lot of questions about this. So there's going to be more than 10,000 volunteers that are going to be needed to organise, run and manage the game, so that's quite a lot of people. And there will be a more of a formal application process that will open sometime next year, and they're for all sorts of different types of roles. So again, that will be, you have to register on the Birmingham 2022 website, submit your details, and then you'll be contacted, you know, in due course. And obviously there would be training and other things that will be taken into account for, you know, for you to do the role. I don't think you just be plucked in expected to do something. So there's some real fantastic opportunities for local people to get involved, and that is what we really want. You know, this is, you know, not just a sporting event that's going to you'd be priced out of or not to get involved. That's what we kind of want, is for as many people to be involved as possible. And just to carry on talking about the opportunities that are available, there is everyone loves a mascot, and the organising committee are looking for children to design the Birmingham 2022 mascot. With the winning entry, they would win family tickets to the opening ceremony on the 28th of July in 2 years' time. And obviously the winning design will inspire the Games' official mascot, which would be, a fantastic thing if a local child was to win. And further details can be found on the Birmingham 2022 website about that. The entry criteria is for children aged between 5 and 15. So unfortunately, if you're a bit older than that, you can't enter. But if you know someone, a child in your family, or a friend, then please, it's something that will be, quite exciting. So that's another opportunity for people to, to get involved. And just kind of moving forward and moving towards the end of the PowerPoint, we want to actively work with people and communities as closely as possible, on the road to the Games, and make everyone, with the ultimate aim to make everyone feel that they have some type of ownership towards the Games, and have that kind of pride, the proud that their home city is hosting such an event. So over the course of the next 2 years, there's going to be forums across the city, and obviously we will be attending meetings such as this to kind of gauge what people are feeling about the Games, and just to take any questions, and what does the Games mean for them. So we're really keen to, we want to communicate as much as possible, because I'm aware that communication, over the last 3 years since Birmingham won the bid might be a little bit scarce. But as we move towards the Games, it's certainly time to get people involved, and hear people's feelings, and maybe dispel any myths or anything like that, or any kind of negative comments, and just a chance for people to get excited about the Games. So please watch this space, and it's great that, like I said, I've been invited to attend this meeting, really to answer any questions. I might not be able to answer all of them, but that's what we're here to do, is to communicate effectively as possible, really, on the road to this amazing event. And obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to to put them into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. I hope I've given as much detail as you as kind of as required, really.
That's fantastic. That's great. Thank you very much indeed. What we've seen, especially with the Commonwealth Games, is, as you said, it is an opportunity for the city, but also for local clubs, organisations, tennis clubs, for example, to get involved. The volunteering opportunities are great for young people who want to get involved and build their confidence, be part of a team. And I was involved with the launch party, the celebration that happened in Centenary Square some years ago, and it was fantastic to see so many young people to come together and put on that fantastic show when the Commonwealth Games came over to Birmingham. So there's absolutely opportunities, and it's nice to see there was a comment around how this is an opportunity for us to embrace inclusion and diversity in the city, and hopefully have something to look forward to with COVID hovering around us everywhere at the moment. I can't see any of the questions that are coming through, just specifically on your briefing there, Claire, just on the Commonwealth Games. It does remain me just to reiterate again, especially around the opportunities that we've got coming up to Sutton Park, and hopefully some investment which will be coming up to Sutton Park to improve the infrastructure there, ready for the games, and that's something which I'm sure many people want to be involved with, as well as transportation links, and that's another thing which we're very mindful of as councillors, to see how it's going to affect residents, but of course, excited about the opportunities it potentially will bring. But I do want to reiterate, especially with the idea of kids being involved with choosing all the mascots, we do want to make sure that everybody is involved, because the Commonwealth Games are coming, and I know that you've done a lot of outreach to train stations, etc., and clubs, and I'm looking forward to that increasing as the months go on. So just having a quick look, can't see any of the comments. So Claire, thank you very much indeed for your time today and for your briefing on the Commonwealth Games.
You're welcome, and obviously if anyone has any further questions, not now but maybe down the line, please contact Councillor Yip and he can pass them to myself, and I'd be happy to answer them as best I can. But just to finalise really, that these games are it's going to be a legacy that will be created for everybody, and there'll be opportunities to be involved. And it would be fantastic to see as many people as possible from the area to cheer on participants in the triathlon. I know that 2 years seems like a very long time away, especially given the COVID situation, but I think we should really embrace it and really maybe look forward to it and really show off Birmingham and the people, and this is what we're all about, this diverse, forward-thinking, vibrant young city that we are. So, yeah.
Okay, fantastic, Claire. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Returning to our agendas, I'm afraid it's me again. We have a couple of other comments that have come through on the group chats, which I'll endeavour to do my best to reply to. Rachel, if you're still on, I don't know if you can reply to the specific question around the tinting windows. I know as a magistrate is that they do, if they do stop the vehicles, that there is equipment to test the light that passes through it to see whether it passes a certain standard, etc. But I imagine a lot of it will depend on resource to actually pull any individuals over, etc. In terms of other questions, I know that David Darks, who is the owner of the Fabrica, a fantastic little store in the lanes, which I believe is open for trading, and I strongly advise everybody to go and attend for any sort of items that they may like. I did a bit of cross-stitching back in the day, so I did purchase something from David a little while back. You mentioned in terms of the bungalow, as I understand it's been privately purchased now, so it's in private hands, and I'm sure any planning applications will be coming through, but I haven't seen anything on that as yet. There's been another question around Hollyfast Road in the bins. I'm not aware of that, but it's something which I'll take forward and have a look at. If there aren't any other questions regarding what we've covered so far, I would like at this point to bring in Carl, who is with Birmingham City Council Highways. Carl, good afternoon, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good afternoon, Councillor, and good evening, everybody else watching at home. Yes, thanks for bringing me in. My name's Carl Randall. I'm the local engineering manager for highways for Birmingham North, which is 23 wards in the north of Birmingham, which includes Wylde Green ward. Looked after Sutton for about 20 years now, and some of the other areas just getting to know them. Extends up to the West Brom football ground now, so quite a big area. The sort of work we do is traffic management, traffic calming, trying to keep the streets as safe as we can with traffic calming, humps, cushions, chicanes, build outs, yellow lines, parking schemes, everything the motorist sees and does, hopefully, is what we put in place. We have got a few things lined up for Wylde Green ward this financial year. We're just working with Councillor Yip on the details based on the amount of money we have for these specific schemes. It's only a small amount, £10,000 for locally determined safety schemes, because the other schemes we do, safe routes to school, local safety schemes, they're the ones that come with the bigger budgets, anything up to £100,000 or more. But we haven't got any plans for local safety scheme in Wylde Green that I'm aware of this year. and we're working at around 5 schools at the moment. Again, it doesn't quite come into Wylde Green for yourselves, but that just gives a bit of a taste and a flavour for the sort of varied nature of the work we do. Happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much, Carl. So I know from many residents who have contacted me around certain requests across the ward, just to reassure everybody that we do have a substantial list of a wish list across the whole ward, including especially Station Road, for example, which I know has come up quite a few times, especially around schools, requests for double yellow lines, drop curbs, etc. There's 2 things which have come my way more recently. Before the lockdown, we were trying to get the support of Sutton girls to see about safety measures by the High Bridge Road. So where on the actual summit of the bridge, there are 2 exits from Wylde Green Station, and many students leave the Wylde Green Station, walk up the track, go up the bridge and exit actually on the summit of the High Bridge Road. And then they have to cross High Bridge Road, heading their way northwards up towards Sutton School. And we did see an accident a little while back, and it is something which similarly we did a campaign on around Bishop Wolfe School. So we are potentially looking at taking some action there, and I'd like to ask residents if they have any feedback or any thoughts on expending some resource over there to try and put some railings, perhaps trying to make the signage, put a bit of paint down to try and make drivers perhaps a little bit more aware that there is an exit, train station exit, and perhaps, of course, a school crossing. Other requests, there are many across the whole ward, but I'm sure everybody appreciates that we are somewhat limited by the resources that we have at our disposal, at my direct disposal at any rate. But if anybody has any thoughts, I do welcome their comments either on Q&A right now, but of course, if they want to email me, very happy to. There's a question from Helen regarding cycle lanes and the UK's commitment to that. If I just publish the question, I know that we've done a lot in council on this, and of course everybody's seen the cycle lanes that's gone into the centre of the city. We'd like to see more about it being more connected, of course, and hopefully not penalising motorists taking space off roads, giving designated safety lines for cyclists, and of course encourage public transport as well. Sorry, Carl, is there anything that you want to add on that?
Yes, there's some exciting things coming for cyclists. There are, off the top of my head, I think there's 3 different strands being worked on at the moment. One of them is direct response to COVID-19, and it's what's called pop-up cycle lanes. As officers, we've just finished going through the sort of detail of what would work, and this is specifically around Brassington Avenue, Birmingham Road, Park Road, Station Street and Reddycroft. It's about the feasibility of making Brassington Avenue 1 lane instead of 2, and having the other lane turned into a 2-way cycle lane with a crossing to get over by the Halifax, by the Wetherspoons pub on the corner, and perhaps a prohibition of movement on Park Road, so perhaps vehicles coming out and turning left only, or vehicles only turning left in. Having something go up through the cutting by the car parks for cyclists to access to the railway station. So that's just about ready to go out to consultation, if not already. There's such a lot of things we've been working on recently, literally about 30 schemes just relating to COVID, so exactly where we are with all of them, but that's imminent to go out. That'll go to the town council, to the ward councillor, and to all sorts of interested parties in that area. There's also work that Sutton Town Council are doing. They've got consultants they've commissioned to look at the wider Sutton coalfield and pinch points, mitigation measures to try and plug the gaps where cyclists feel they can't cycle on roads, whether it's the type and nature of the road or the narrowness. So what they've done is highlight these key roads, and we've looked for either alternative routes, and it's quite an ambitious scheme. It will involve numerous new signal control crossings, cycle lanes, whether it's paint and signs on some existing, or whether it's a bit more wholesale taking out of verges or altering pavements. That's all over Sutton Coldfield. It's in its early stage, and the detail of what can be done and what can be funded, and what areas can be turned into, I forgot the term, low traffic neighbourhoods. That's all a big piece of work that's ongoing, and that I'm helping with the consultation on, with my knowledge and advice from previous years. And then there's also a wider cycle scheme that's been worked on by Birmingham City Council, a little bit similar to the old sort of Bike North Birmingham Sustrans, re-looking at some of those routes, and can they be done and brought in. So probably 3 avenues cycling related that could turn into, you know, quite some large schemes. There's a lot of serious money behind this, and with the reduction in vehicle use at the moment, it's quite a good time to try and get some of these in. Some of them will be like experimental, like the pop-up cycle lanes, which will be either an emergency order, or experimental order, or a longer term temporary order, which will be up to 18 months. And that gives us the opportunity to put them in and to see what works, what doesn't work, what needs to be changed. And then ultimately it can be made permanent after 18 months or amended within that time.
That's great, Carl. Thank you very much. There's other comments coming in regarding especially requests for double lines on Green London Boulevard, which we've of course spoken at length on as well. Also the traffic on Florence Road and Balls Road, which we'll pick up in a second. But just to let residents know that there have been lots of requests for double lines across many areas, and in some ways they are incredibly expensive to put down. Of course, then it moves on to enforcement, and we also find that it does move the issue further down the road, that we find especially around the train station. You've seen the increase of double lines, especially around Chester Road train station, as we've slowly put more and more down, and unfortunately just moves the issue further and further up the road. But we just want to reassure residents that we are aware of that specific one, Celia. Regarding Florence Road and Broadfield Road, so just to put you on the spot a little bit, Carl, speaking to residents along the road as I was doing some leafleting, we are looking at trying to turn that into perhaps a one-way route, trying to make it a bit safer, trying to perhaps reduce the speed on it. Again, it's something that we've spoken about a little bit. I think we've discussed that speed bumps are a little bit cost prohibitive. Maybe trying to turn it into one way could be something which we could take forward, redirecting the bus. Is there anything that you can perhaps give on that?
Yes, we did have, one of my staff did mention to me, we had an inquiry in the other day. I think one or two people looking to gather information to look at getting something done on those roads. And as you say, over the years we have had many requests. A slight sort of working arrangements are needed because part of it falls under Erdington Ward, and the rest falls under Wylde Green Ward, which isn't a big obstacle, but it could be an advantage if wards wanted to come together and help fund it, because then obviously it becomes more affordable with more ward monies. But it certainly can be looked at. It could be a prohibition of entry on one end. For example, you could have no entry from Chester Road to Florence Broadfields Road, that end of it, which would mean then everybody having to go up to the signals at Chester Road, Sutton Road, and turn left, and then left again into Broadfields, or second left into Florence, which is possible, but that's something that needs to be teased out in any consultation stage, because while residents request these measures, it's often other residents that don't want you know, a more onerous journey to get home. Or you could have the prohibition of entry at the Birmingham Road end. But either way, people would have to do a longer detour to get in, and that's often where a scheme can fall down, is getting the consensus, getting everybody to agree the same thing. Now, if you did have it as, say, a prohibition of entry and it became two-way within, that's one option, or you could make it one way. So it could be one way in from Chester Road and then no entry at the Birmingham Road. That could work well on those roads because they are quite narrow. There's a lack of parking in general for residents. Most residents park on the road, and that does sometimes cause issues for larger vehicles going through, or the bus. But if it was made one way, it could also increase the speed a little bit. It's not an ideal road for speeding with a 90-degree bend, but nevertheless, people do tend to pick up the speed a little bit if they're if they know there's nothing coming the other way. So ideally, if there was enough funding, it could be one way with some traffic calming, or a prohibition of entry similar. But it's all about identifying the money and the priority, and then yes, those things can be done.
So it gives everybody an idea about the encyclopedic knowledge that Carl has in Sutton Coldfield. I'm sure everybody appreciates just how well served we are by yourself being in Sutton for such a long time and knowing exactly all the roads, putting you on the spot, and you being able to give such a comprehensive answer. Very grateful for, and also just to put out as a resident that there are a number of schemes which we are looking at that we're very much aware of, and we do hope to try and get your feedback and comments on, and then to take it forward if we have enough support. Another thing which we've been trying to campaign for a little while is to increase the parking in front of Verdo Lounge up to where Tony the Butcher's is, trying to increase the amount of parking to support the high streets, of course, trying to make the area a little bit more a beautification project, for example, and that's something which we have discussed as well at length, taken to Town Council, and we're waiting to try and see if we can progress that as well. So a number of things which we are looking at. There's a long list of things that we would like to do, but of course we're very much limited in funds. And again, I do encourage residents, if they are able to at the end of the meeting, just to email myself with their thoughts. It is something which we do log carefully and we do take into consideration. And of course, the more comments that we get in support for any one project, we do push up the priority. So, Carl, if there isn't anything else coming through on the group chats. So yes, I think Emma's just published a comment around the group chats on Florence, and we do know about this. A couple of the residents on the group chat have contacted me about this specifically, and that's of course why I raised it this evening directly to you, Carl, just to give you due notice of what may come in your way. In which case, Carl, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Okay, so moving on towards the end of our agenda, our time together is coming towards a close. Going through again some of the other comments which come through on the group chat, just to touch on the ward issues around peri-peri. So I will return to that in a little while. There's been a comment around beggars again from David yeah, the beggars around the lanes, I think it is, it's just referring to. So this is something which I know the two town councillors have campaigned on, and something that we are very actively pushing against. Not so much the beggars themselves, but the aggressive begging and the style of them going door to door. On a similar related note, we have heard of Romanians going door to door down Wylde Green Road, possibly down Kempston Avenue, going door to door and again asking people for money. We do ask people just to be extra careful and cautious if you do see anybody touting such going door to door and doing such things, and of course do report it to 101. The thing about reporting it to the police is that the more people that report it, the higher the priority is and the more resource that the Westminster Police Force will put towards in addressing that. Other comments include around the Wylde Green pub. So we haven't had a resubmission of the planning application to that, but I know that many residents have contacted me when we were objecting to the particular scheme that they put forward. What we will do is that as soon as I hear back from them, as soon as the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum, for example, receive notice of any future application, we will be contacting residents and asking people for their thoughts. A few months ago, there was some some issues around waste being dumped and people trespassing on the site, and contacting the new landowners. We did get some extra fencing and protection put on around that to secure the site. There's also been some comments around whether to have it as fencing and boarding. My view is very much that the fencing is slightly better. It makes it transparent, people can see through it, and it sort of discourages people from hiding any objects on the other side. Boarding is slightly more targetable from graffiti as well, and I think trying to keep it the open space is something that we have discussed at length with officers and residents as well. Moving on to the other issues that we've found around hideways. I'm very much aware of the potholes that have been marked up along the Wylde Green Road, Pilkington Road, Birmingham Road, for example, and it's something which we are following up on Keir, who are the new administrators for the road, on this. What I'd also like to do at this point is just to draw attention to an earlier comment around peri-peri. So recently we've had a licence application to change the opening hours of the peri-peri chicken shop, which is next to the co-op on the Birmingham Road, to open up to 3 in the morning. Now, this is something which I am objecting to, and I'm objecting to as strongly as I can. Any objections must fall within certain criteria which fall within the licensing committee's remit. And I'm grateful for my ward colleague, Councillor David Barry, my past ward colleague, Councillor David Barry, for his advice on this. And any issues in opposition to the potential changes to open up to 3 in the morning very much need to be on the grounds of public safety and those sorts of things as well, reduction of crime, and making sure that the area is maintained safe and harmonious, as opposed to any other issues which may be addressed at a future planning stage. So regarding the licence, I have just posted the link to a change.org petition, which we have been circulating. It's got over 500 names last time I checked, which I will be submitting to council. As I understand it, they have the police are broadly they're not objecting to the licence change. The measures which they've been requested would be including things like CCTV. I understand that only from midnight, sort of 12:30 in the morning onwards, there'll be delivery only. They've requested that delivery drivers will have to keep their vehicles switched off, for example, no loud music, no alcohol being consumed with the premises, nobody allowed in the premises. But my view very much is that with the way that the ward is changing, shall we say, in recent years, it may be another step in the wrong direction. It may lead to further ingress upon how things are changing further. And in terms of antisocial behaviour, we've seen it's been slowly increasing, especially behind the co-op. So if I may ask residents if they are broadly supportive of my stand on this, is please do circulate the petition, do sign it. And if you're interested and very concerned, do email me directly with your thoughts and comments, and I'll make sure that goes up to planning, licensing. Any of the comments that I've been further made aware of in terms of the ward in general, we seem to have covered most of the other things which I was going to raise in various comments that have been posted by residents. Again, if anybody has any of the further questions or comments, please do comment in. Otherwise, I feel that we may have covered most things, and heading towards the end of our time together, and just having a quick look. So we've covered in terms of the questions around various bins around the lanes, for example. I know Pat Brown, who's the secretary for the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum, has raised this, and I'm very grateful for her support in especially planning applications and in helping us keep the area clean. A lot of the litter picks that we do around the lanes is of course supported by the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum, and we're grateful for residents and their support in coming out and helping and using, of course, their equipment, the equipment of the Wylde Green Neighbourhood Forum. So very appreciative of that. I know that the Wylde Green Rotary are also interested in doing some regular litter picks, and if anybody's interested in coming out and supporting the community with that, it'd be great to have your details, and hopefully we can try and be a little bit more proactive in supporting the ward. There's a few questions that come in regarding speeding down Penn's Lane, backstreet speeding down Orphanage Road, Birmingham Road. Again, it's something which has come up many times, unfortunately, in the emails that I receive. Speeding across some of the broader roads in the ward, for example, green lanes, the boulevards, no clear marking, and it's very difficult for us to maintain a permanent police presence, for example, to put down speed bumps, as I've already explained earlier. But it's something which we are working with the Westminster Police to try and get more speed watches done, to try and get more on the stop police surveys, and for example, and it's something which we are well aware of. But unfortunately, aside from putting speed cameras everywhere, which would be perhaps a restriction on people's liberties and freedoms, there's very little that we can do on that. There's a couple of questions around retail opening, but more delivery drivers opening up and down the local roads. And again, appreciate your comments on this. There's a lot of people who have commented saying that they are broadly in opposition to the peri-peri licensing changes. My personal view is I think that there may be a strong chance that this does get passed. And again, I'm grateful to my fellow councillor for his advice on perhaps if it goes towards a planning change or how we can further oppose it. But I do hope the residents will join me in opposing this, because I do feel that it will further change the nature of our ward and perhaps lead to increased antisocial behaviour and late night trouble, which I know many residents have contacted me about. So I can't see any of the further questions coming in. I've covered all the points that I wish to cover. If there's nothing else, it remains me just to thank everybody for joining us on a difficult virtual meeting. I hope everybody appreciates it's very much just myself talking to a laptop, and I appreciate that we don't get the body language or the atmosphere and the direct feedback and interaction from yourselves as we would in a ward meeting. I did prepare an online poll, which unfortunately I'm unable to circulate, in a survey to try and get people's feedback on how you found this, if you would welcome a future one in the next few months, or if you would very much like to see a return to face-to-face meetings, if there's any of the issues that you would like to see covered. I appreciate, and I'm sorry that we have been able to get the representative from the Westminster Police here this evening, but I hope that perhaps we can try and get someone in at future meetings. But I do welcome your feedback. My email address is of course alex.yip@birmingham.gov.uk. And I do thank you very much for your time in joining us this evening. And I also want to thank Leslie, who has been the council officer who sat behind and put this together and been the technical support, as well as John, who is again a community support officer for the council. And everybody's time this evening, not just the officers and presenters, but for yourselves in taking the time to join us here this evening. I will stay on for a little bit while afterwards, just to see if anybody has any further comments. I can see some coming in. So we've got a final question regarding the planning application on the back of the house for green lanes by the boulevard walk through to green lanes. So that planning application was rejected on the delegated powers of the officers, of planning officers, as I fully expected it may well do. And I'm grateful for residents who came together in signing the petition against that. Again, we felt it was an inappropriate development that was being put forward by the applicant, and there was a sizable petition. A lot of residents came together and strongly opposed what they're putting forward. I fully expect that they would at future times put forward subsequent applications to put something else, probably a little bit more moderate and reasonable. And of course, we would look at that upon its own merits, and I will, as appropriate, update residents as and when I receive that, as well as other contentious planning applications that we like. Final comment, I think we'll end on the evening with from Emma, and thank you very much for your comment. And I hope that many of the residents have been able to join us this evening together from the comfort of your own home with hopefully a cup of tea or something stronger this evening. And I think at this point I will close the meeting, and again thank everybody for joining us. I do hope that you found it useful, especially the update regarding COVID, and I do hope that you'll be able to join us for the next one. Thank you very much and good evening.
Thank you very much.